Welcome to the Michael Simmons Show, where we help you create blockbuster content that changes the world and builds your business. We dive deep into the habits and hacks of today's top thought leaders. Now, here's the show.
Today, I present to you one of my best friends, Adam Gilbert. I've known Adam for over 15 years now, before he started his current company, MyBodyTutor.com. And Adam's company basically provides daily accountability for people who want to lose weight. And it's a huge passion of his, and the results he's gotten are just incredible. He's been in business for 15 years, as I mentioned. He now has over 50 coaches helping him and has served thousands of people, helping them get these results. So Adam does articles. He's done a lot of interviews before, but really what I want to talk with him about is his model of transformation. Because as thought leaders, we're not only creating content, we often package that content as courses or coaching to help people get a transformative result. And Adam is truly, even though he's really well known in his niche, he's not as well known at a larger level. And I think he holds the keys to what it takes to create a transformational program that changes people's lives and goes viral, because a lot of his growth has actually come from virality. So if that sounds exciting to you and you want to create courses that are viral and transformative, you're in the right place. Let's jump in. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Adam. Really, really excited to have you on this.
Thanks so much for having me. Me too. I'm excited as well.
So My Body Tutor, it's celebrating its 14th year in business, which you started My Body Tutor not long after we got to know each other. So we can mark our relationship to about 15 years. And there's not many friends that I've had for 15 years that are so close. So just really exciting on that level, and just to see your success that you've had with it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy. 15 years. It's wild.
So My Body Tutor helps people lose weight and live a happy life, a healthy life. And so on the outside, it might look different than the typical interview that I do. But I think what makes what you're doing really interesting is that losing weight, technically, it's a very easy thing. Like, you just move around, do exercise, and eat well. But the reality we know is that most people fail if they're just doing it on their own. And I think there's a lot of things like that. So most people who start writing and want to write a book or something like that never finish. Most people who start a business give up early, because really solving those type of challenges are hard. So I was just curious, what made you want to really solve that type of challenge and really build a business that could actually solve it, rather than just giving people recipes and then you're on your own?
Yeah, well, I guess the first part of the question is, what made me want to get into this? And, that kind of goes way back. Growing up, my sister kind of yo-yo dieted throughout her childhood, and I'd see her, when she was, feeling good and impacted every aspect of her life. And then when I was in 7th grade, my father had a heart attack. And my sister's 5 years older. She was actually learning to drive, and we drove him to the hospital as he was having a heart attack, which was frightening.
Wow. I didn't realize that, actually.
Yeah. Then a few days later, he had triple bypass surgery. So seeing him kind of go through that was terrifying.
He must have been pretty young at that point as well.
Yeah. And then that same year, actually, he wound up, getting diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So seeing him kind of deteriorate mentally and physically throughout the years until he passed away was really, really hard. So the combination of my sister, my father, seeing that, just being so close, really made me value my health and fitness so much. Seeing how my sister was, a different person when she was feeling good, and just the smile and the confidence, it made me want to do that for other people. So that really has been with me, very, very early on. And then in terms of, why I started this and the way we do it is, health and fitness has always been my passion. And I started my career at Ernst Young in 2005. And, even before then, but there as well, I was the go-to guy for health and fitness. And I'd always give people, diet plans and exercise plans. And I'd see them a week or two later, depending on client engagements and, life, et cetera. And it was always the same story. It was always, I love the plan you made for me, but, And the but was, I got caught up with kids, I got caught up with, work, I got caught up with life, happy hours, etc. And I realized they had the plan, right? They had the knowledge. I gave them a plan, they couldn't stick with it. So that's where the idea for accountability came to light, because I realized they had the knowledge, they needed to implement it on a daily basis. So I quit my full-time job in 2007 and been at this ever since.
Yeah, really interesting. And so you have a model for transformation. And I just know that just from knowing you over the years, just had amazing results. Can you just talk a little bit about the results you've gotten and maybe compare that to the normal?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think the reason why we get the results we do is we're not just giving people a plan and then essentially saying, hey, good luck, let's touch base in a week or two. Because we know information alone rarely changes behavior. We're giving people information, and then we're guiding them, supporting them, coaching them, holding them accountable every single day. So the results we get are, to me, what makes me most satisfied is, when people say I've tried everything under the sun and nothing's worked but your program. And I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but, accountability is certainly a huge part of it.
Yeah. And so one thing I think is really interesting is you've been around for so long and you've been optimizing for the variable of transformation over time. So you have a model that's kind of optimizing for that. What does your model look like right now for transformation from when somebody registers to what the journey is like for them?
Yeah. So when someone signs up, they fill out a questionnaire. Once I get the questionnaire back, I personally still match all of our clients and coaches. I'm extremely hands-on. So I match the client with the coach.
How many coaches do you have?
We're over 50 coaches now.
Yeah, amazing.
Thanks. So the coach reaches out. They have an initial phone consultation. On that call, we'll talk to them about their current diet, their current exercise, their objectives, their goals. Most importantly, we create a plan that they feel comfortable with. Because, one of the rules, for behavior change and reaching your goals, of course, and it sounds like common sense, but it's not common practice, is, the plan actually has to be sustainable. It has to be doable. It has to be practical. It has to be something that you can actually stick with, right? So it can't be a cookie diet or a shake diet or a lettuce diet or a grapefruit diet or, a no fun diet or any of these crazy diets. So the point is we're setting them up on a plan that they feel comfortable with. And then the real magic happens. Every day after that, they use our easy to use mobile app or website. They enter their food, they enter their exercise. If it was an exercise day, they submit their report. And then every day after, their very own coach is personally writing back with feedback in the form of suggestions, encouragement, motivation, critique, etc. And the fact that we're in communication with them every single day makes all the difference.
And you talked about in the beginning making a plan with people. So I kind of used to be the type of person who, if I want to do something, I'm going to be like, I'm going to exercise 5 times a day and then just go really into it. And now I've a little bit subscribed a little bit more to the tiny habits approach of making plans that I enjoy, that I'm comfortable with, and then adding momentum. How do you think about that? Of when you create a plan, what are those key variables, and then how do you balance them out?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, I use the analogy of, if you're driving from New York to California, it's far more effective to go, 75, 80 miles an hour consistently than to go 100 miles an hour and burn out, right? And so often, we start these plans and, we're doing too much too soon. And to me, the best plans are ones where, you feel hopeful, right? You feel like you can actually do it. And really the formula for hope that I've discovered is about 3 things. Number 1, it's having a clear and defined goal, right? Number 2, it's having a pathway to reach that goal. And number 3 is the most important. It's believing you can actually follow the pathway, right? And so often we start these diets or these exercise plans, and sure, you might be able to go to the gym for 2 hours a day when you're first, when you're on that motivation high, but that we know motivation doesn't last, right? Just like willpower doesn't last. So it's much more effective to start small, to build that practice. And once that practice, I like to say the practice turns into a routine, and then the routine turns into a habit, right? And at first the practice is weird. It feels uncomfortable. But if you do it enough, it becomes routine, then the routine becomes a habit. But very much like you, starting small is way more effective because you can always turn it up.
And BJ Fogg has this idea that you should almost go ridiculously small. So instead of flossing your teeth, your goal should be to floss 1 tooth. Is there a way that you think about how small to go on something that's optimal?
So I think, we're often in a state of inertia, right? We're trying to get from a state of inertia to a state of momentum. And that's the hardest part. It's right.
Right.
Like it's, the world's strongest man competitions. One of my favorite events is watching them tug the tractor trailer. And the hardest part about that event is getting the tractor trailer from a standstill to it moving, right? Once it's moving, once there's some momentum, it gets easier and easier and easier. So to me, I always ask the question, like, what's the least you can do without doing nothing, right? Very similar to BJ Fogg. And it's an interesting question because, I'm sure there are times where you're exhausted after a long day with the kids, same here. And it's like, there are times where I just want to do nothing. And I ask myself, what's the least I can do without doing nothing?
I really like that question. You could just apply that across your entire life.
Yeah, because the whole idea is to get you moving. Because once you start moving, you're in a very different state of mind than when you're in a state of inertia.
I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast recently, and they have UFC fighters on there all the time. And one of the coaches was saying that unless you're a professional athlete, you should never be sore. And his overall point was saying that if you're exercising to the point of soreness, you're pushing yourself where you're probably going to resist it because it's uncomfortable. And so you should actually just be going little bits and focusing on consistency. So I guess one question for you is, let's say the size, the tininess is one dimension. Should the habit, or when you're trying to create a change, should it be something you're really looking forward to? How do you think about the desire for it? Or is it okay to resist it? Is that is it a bad signal that if you feel like, oh, I'm exercising at 3, I'm not looking forward to it, that a sign of imminent failure?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I think there's people who enjoy exercising and there's people who don't. And I think especially for the people who don't, it's really important that you finish your workout feeling great, right? That you finish your workout feeling energized. And if you go too far, if you push too far and you're absolutely exhausted, then yeah, you're going to be fearful. You're not going to want to go back the next day. So, for people who don't like exercising, I often say, like, you want to finish your workout when you're feeling good, not when you're feeling spent, not when you're feeling like, not when you're just on the floor dripping in sweat, exhausted.
And what about starting a workout? Is there a certain way you should feel at the beginning of a workout, in your opinion?
So I always joke, like, the best time to work out is when you feel like it. And the second best time to work out is when you don't feel like it. And, this is what I do. This is my life. And there are many times where I don't feel like working out. And I think one of the most foundational and most transformative practices is learning how to start when you don't feel like it. And I think the key to starting is, not creating this daunting task, right? So especially when you're starting out, again, going back to the 2-hour workout, it's far more effective to say, you know what, I'm going to commit to walking 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes versus saying I have this daunting workout to do. And it just, I can't wrap my head around that.
It's really interesting that right now there's a lot of books coming out on habits, particularly in the past 7 years with Charles Duhigg and BJ Fogg and James Clear. And all of these are great books. Some of them are they're all based off of research in some way. Your approach is based off of you're working with, I guess, probably hundreds, thousands of clients over the years and really getting day-to-day feedback over months and years. And I was curious, are there any areas where you differ on conventional wisdom on habits?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I think the one thing that I see a lot of books talk about, and those books are all great. Gretchen Rubin has a book, Better Than Before. I mean, they're all fantastic books. Is a lot of these authors talk about falling out of habit or falling out of the habit of something. But to me, it's not truly a habit if you can fall out of it, right? Like, I brush my teeth every day, twice a day. I don't ever, rarely do I forget to brush my teeth, or I'm never like, oh my God, it's been a few weeks since I haven't, brushed my teeth. Right. So to me, it's truly not a habit unless it's second nature, unless it's part of your identity, unless it's part of who you are. And that to me is something that's interesting because I think a lot of these books talk about, falling out of habit. One of the things we really pride ourselves on is helping people get to a point where the behaviors we're implementing are second nature, where they're, just habitual, where they're truly habitual. You don't fall out of the habit brushing your teeth.
So what I hear you saying between the lines is there's two big steps within the creation and maintenance of a habit. One first step is going from 0 to 1, and that's a really hard step. And then there's a step from when you're doing the habit, and then you actually are the habit. That is who you are. What is the key from how long does that take? What does that look like? What's key to go to that next stage?
Yeah. So, like the old, wisdom or what we heard is 30 days for a habit. And, they've proved that's not necessarily true. And of course, it depends on the type of habit, right? So brushing my teeth or flossing requires less effort than me going to the gym, right? Or, whatever it might be. Like different habits require different amounts of effort. So yeah, there's no doubt starting from 0 to 1 is often the hardest part. But the key thing is the practice of it. And I think sometimes we mistake a habit for the newness, for the motivation wave that we often get when we're starting something new. And sometimes these practices truly don't become habit until we get through the point where it's uncomfortable, right? I call it FDR, fear, discomfort, and resistance. And especially the more effort a habit requires, the more likely you're going to have to go through that to truly get to the other side. Yeah.
So it struck me that one way of thinking about a habit after hearing you is what you do when you have low motivation. Or it's another way of saying whether you do it consistently all the time in the future. And it's really interesting around identity and what it takes for something to become part of your identity and whether you believe, like you said, that you can do it. And I was reading one of your articles and you were talking about how if you've tried a goal for a long time, like let's say losing weight, and you keep on doing it, but then you're yo-yoing, you could lose confidence at the time. And I've noticed the same thing with writing or starting a business. When we're working with people, it's typically they've already tried it a lot and lost self-confidence. Beyond just doing the habit, what can one do to get more self-confidence?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And we should talk about identity too, because I think that's super fascinating and helpful. But, I think confidence often comes down to hope, right? And for a lot of people, especially in my world, they've tried a million different diets and they keep failing. And obviously failing is not a fun feeling. And there's a part of them that wants to just avoid that feeling in general. And each time they fail, it's kind of reinforcing this identity. And that's why it's so important to go back to hope. And again, there is a formula for hope, right? Again, it's having a clear and defined goal, right? So for your people, it's, perhaps starting a business or writing or whatever it might be. So having a clear and defined goal, having a pathway to reach that goal, right? So it could be, writing for 20 minutes a day, or it could be walking for 15 minutes a day, or it could be reducing, your afternoon sugar, whatever it might be. But you have a pathway to reach your goal. But the key thing is believing you can actually follow the pathway. And that is so important and so often overlooked because you're starting these diets, you're starting these, these regimens, whatever, and consciously or subconsciously, you can't stick with it. And you're setting yourself up for failure. And that goes back to what we were just talking about. Start small. Because even if you feel like this is too easy, don't let your mind trick you, because our mind is constantly trying to trick us saying, this isn't enough or it's not worth it. So it becomes this, unless I'm training for a marathon, I'm not doing anything, right? But of course, we know it can't just be all or nothing. The goal is always something, not all or nothing.
That's a good quotable. Always something, not all or nothing. And can you tell me more though about how to build that identity? Is it truly you feel like starting small, getting consistent, then the identity just naturally happens? Over time, you're not just someone doing a goal, you are the goal. Or are there affirmations or visualizations or anything like that you have found work?
Yeah, so I think first off, it comes from understanding and accepting that, again, there's going to be FDR, fear, discomfort, and resistance, right? No matter what you do, there's going to be that, right? The way I put it is, if you do what you've always done, that's going to feel comfortable, right? By nature, if you just keep doing what you've done, it's going to feel comfortable. If you do something differently, by nature, it's going to feel uncomfortable just because it's different, right? It's just the way it is. So first, I think it's accepting that it's going to be uncomfortable. And then, I think you're very much in line with this. Like sometimes the best advice is often in questions. and asking yourself the question of, what would a healthy and fit person do right now? Or what would a writer do right now? Or what would a business owner do right now? And again, going back to starting small, you do what that person would do, even if it's just having a piece of fruit or going for a 5-minute walk, right? Because you ask yourself what you do that. And the thing is, actions reinforce identity. But then, of course, the more you're doing something, it becomes it becomes a virtuous cycle, right? So, your actions reinforce your identity, and then your identity reinforces your actions. Because as you do more and more, you build this momentum and you start to feel good and you start to act like that person. Then it's like, oh, you know what? I am a healthy and fit person. And it becomes this beautiful virtuous cycle.
Do you have any, BJ Fogg talks about when you do a habit and you succeed, even just doing a fist pump or something like that gives you the celebration of it. Of course, you have the feedback every day, so I imagine if somebody's doing well, you're celebrating that. How do you think about celebration as part of this formula for identity?
I think that, I think celebration is always good. One of my rules of thumb is like, if you're going to celebrate or reward yourself with a purchase, one of the best things you can do is buy something that's going to make it easier to do the habit. So for example, let's say you're trying to exercise more. A great way to do that, or a great way to celebrate that, would be to buy fun exercise clothes.
Right. Instead of saying, okay, if I just do this, then I can eat this slice of pizza and the cake that I want.
Right. And ideally, the habit itself or the practice you're trying to establish is the reward in itself. Right. And, the key to that is doing it in a doable way. Right. So if you're exercising for 2 hours on your first day in the gym or the first day at home, whatever, that's going to probably not lead to feeling great. You're probably going to feel exhausted. But if you exercise for 15 minutes and you feel energized and accomplished, that's the reward in itself, ideally.
Right. And that goes back to the idea of finishing on a good note, not where you're just you're like crawling out of it. And okay, really interesting. And so one thing I've really noticed in our course is I really resonate this with the idea of FDR. And Seth Godin talks about it with the resistance. And I feel like in the last 10 years, that's been one of the main things he's talked about. And so one thing I've really noticed is that people often use those as signs that they're on the wrong path. That, okay, I'm doing this and I don't feel right, therefore must not be right for me. Versus, I notice other people who have it as part of their identity, they're like, good, this means I'm on the right path. So it's almost the same signal, but just interpreted in completely different ways. How do you think about do you notice that, and how do you think about it?
Yeah. Oh, this is my favorite. I mean, one of my, mantras is, discomfort is our compass. Again, going back to what I just said, discomfort means we're doing something differently. And you keep doing what you've always done, it's going to feel comfortable and you're going to get the same result, right? If you're doing something differently, it's going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to get a different result. So to me, discomfort is our compass. It lets us know we're headed in the right direction. And of course, the key thing to remember is, what's easy now is once hard, right? What's hard now will soon be easy if you stick with the practice. And it's actually, it benefits us. The fact that it's hard, it's known as cognitive disfluency. And what they've shown is that the harder something is to learn, the stickier it becomes, right? The more habitual it eventually becomes.
Yeah. I've also heard it called desirable difficulty as well, but that same. Interesting. I love hearing new words. And writing that down. And taking a step back here from weight loss and even just transformation to online education. Online education's maybe about 20 years old, give or take, depending on when you measure it from. And I think the first version was these courses where you record something and then you put them together in lessons, and then that's the course. And it seems like there's a shift now to more cohort-based programs. Not to say that these recorded courses, I feel like you can get better and if you get really good feedback loops and have shorter videos, that can work really well still. But I think people are saying that people are seeing that knowledge is no longer enough. So how does your work with MyBodyTutor make you think differently about online education and where it's going in this whole space?
Yeah, great question. I mean, my thesis from day one was that a lack of knowledge is not the real issue. It's a lack of consistent action, right? And we can certainly get into it in terms of health and fitness or anything, but it's about a lack of consistent action. And it's been really interesting to see how course creators have changed their offering. So, when I first started, it was more about we're selling this knowledge, right? There's a curtain, and behind this curtain, we're going to give you all these secrets, all this knowledge to get to where you want to be. And then as time went on, it was interesting to see how all these course creators realized that rarely were people following through or implementing the knowledge. So then they started incorporating accountability, right? And accountability, of course, is the glue that ties commitment to result. So they started offering accountability, and of course, what some of these course creators have realized is it's very hard, it's very difficult to offer one-on-one accountability. So then it was a question of, well, how do we want to offer the accountability? And I think that's where the peer accountability came into play, right? So as I call it a peer accountability versus pro accountability. And they're certainly effective, but you can get a very different result. But I think that's where it came from. It was, first it was knowledge, then they realized people weren't following through. And, what's the point of all this knowledge if people aren't implementing it? Then they wanted to offer accountability. And then it's become, well, how do we offer this accountability? What's the most effective way to offer it for the scale we're trying to work at?
Yeah, I do think there's a huge difference between pro accountability and peer accountability. What are your thoughts on group coaching? I think there's obviously huge benefits to one-on-one coaching. As you said, it's more resource intensive to offer. Group coaching can have benefits in that, like Landmark or other programs where you're hearing other people's experiences and you're part of a community. And when you see other people's experiences, it helps you reflect on your own blind spots because it's harder to see it in yourself. Is there a way that you think about that? And Adam, I just lost your, there we go. I lost your video, but it's back. How do you think about group coaching?
Yeah. So listen, obviously I'm biased in one-on-one coaching because I've seen the results, right? For me, at least in the fitness world, group coaching is tricky because I always ask, like, if you're in a group and you don't show up, what happens? Does anyone notice? For a lot of these groups, no one notices. And so there's no accountability. But I think depending on the type of objective you have and the type of goal you have, it can be very effective because, like you said, it allows you to reflect on where you are. And, oftentimes we can learn the most about focusing on someone else's problems, right? And see what they're going through. So I think it really depends, on the objective and the goal. I think for something where it's very intense in terms of, like, for losing weight, it's a process, right? And, you're eating multiple times a day, you're exercising. There's just a lot of, daily things that have to happen in order to get to where you want to be. But I think for business, for other things, it could certainly be very effective. Absolutely.
Are there any innovations that you have or you see coming down the pike that are beyond what we've talked about with pro accountability, peer accountability, group coaching that you think the future of online courses will all have, or a good portion of them will?
I mean, I think people realize that, one-on-one is effective. And I think people are trying to offer that. So, like, one thing I've noticed, which is interesting, I mean, this isn't really accountability, but it's just interesting how, influencers, I hate that word, but influencers or celebrities are, having this, like, you can text them, right? And it's like they have this big phone number that they text thousands and tens of thousands and millions of people. And I think it's trying to get to this closeness. But in terms of, like, your question, I don't know if there's anything that I think it's just, perhaps it's video, perhaps it's, video exists, but like text, there's nothing I know of right now. I think companies are trying to figure out the best way to offer accountability for the scale they're playing at.
What has allowed you to be successful with pro accountability that other companies who tried it and realized it's too complicated to offer? What's made it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've been laser focused since day one. I mean, we've literally had the same two offerings since day one, right? We have two plans. That's it. And, my mission from day one is, how do we become the best in the world at helping people stay consistent with their health and fitness goals? And it's always been, let's find world-class coaches and let's find people to help. And that's it. That's all we focused on. We've never, deviated into group coaching. And sure, it could be more profitable. It could be easier. But to me, what people need, especially in this space, is one-on-one coaching. And that's why, we've never deviated from the plan.
Yeah. What I take away from that, as I'm someone who likes to take something and be like, okay, how can we do this, add this and add this? So I appreciate how your mind thinks here. And it's been interesting just seeing it over a 14-year period. But I can see how, number one, you've kept a really high quality bar. You didn't make sacrifices on that quality in order to scale more. But then by staying very focused, you've been able to just build better systems, get better at it. So you actually have gotten form of scalability. Do you feel like it is? Did I capture that right? Do you feel like the model, if you focus on it, can work for people? You just have to really focus on it. And
listen, there's no doubt we've sacrificed growth. We've sacrificed growth, and it's taken a long time to get to where we are. But to me, I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I just really believed in what we offered, and I wanted to offer that and continue to offer that. I didn't want to compromise on what I felt people really needed. People don't need, in this space, in my opinion, I don't think people need group coaching. And it's worth, just kind of quickly talking about peer versus pro accountability. So peer accountability is obviously friends, family, et cetera. And I always go back to my mom as an example. She's a former high school English teacher. She used to tutor for the SATs. And when it was time for me to take the SATs many years ago, of course, I didn't take it seriously because she's my mom, right? So it's really hard to be brutally honest with a friend or a family member. It's hard to tell someone the hard truth that we sometimes need to hear. Whereas, of course, pro accountability is you're hiring someone and their sole objective is to help you get to where you want to be. And sometimes there's tough love. It's always love, but sometimes it's tough. You might not hear what you want to hear, but you hear what you need to hear. I think it's worth just noting that, because I think, especially if you're looking for accountability, you really have to decide what would work best for you.
Yeah, I've done a lot of peer accountability, and I feel like when it works, I've often had two other people, because if that way one person's not consistent, it doesn't completely just come ground to zero. And then in my mind, I just account that most of them are going to fail, in the sense that just it takes time to find those right person who's just as committed as you are, is going to be on time and take it as seriously. And so it is what it is. Your one question I had for you is, so the core of what you offer is accountability and one-on-one coaching and support. But it seems like information is a part of it as well. What are your thoughts on this, let's say, just-in-time information? So do you have a library of paid content that, as you're giving one-on-one coaching and somebody has a challenge, you're like, oh, here's the challenge you're facing, and here's an article or resource we've created on it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question and a good point. So, I think there's accountability, and I think some people think accountability or kind of sell it as, good job, bad job. It's like, did you do this? Great. You didn't do it? Not good. Like, why didn't you do it? And it's kind of shame. And I think accountability is certainly a core part of what we offer, but it's also teaching, right? And it's helping people change their relationship with food, helping people change their behaviors, and information is a part of that. But the way we do it, we call it stepping stones. So you have a stepping stone. Once you pass that stepping stone, and as we like to say, once that's set in stone, then you move on to the next stepping stone. And slowly but surely, you're changing your behavior. I always use the analogy of, if you change a ship one plank at a time, eventually it becomes a new ship. And that's kind of how we do it with our clients. So it's not, hey, here's a challenge you're going through. Go read this article. It's more, because we have so much experience now, we anticipate where they are in their journey, and we're coaching them sometimes as they're going through it, or even right before they're going through it.
So it's rather than sending them to a link, you're actually coaching people with sending texts, or once you have conversations with them, helping them that way. And when you say stepping stones, it's almost like a mastery-based performance. It's not a curriculum you just go through at the same rate. Everyone goes at the same rate. It's one where once you master a thing, that particular person, then you go on to the next thing.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. And what are your thoughts on, there's different course platforms. We use Teachable. There's Kajabi. There's other Udemy. Sometimes I found them a little bit cumbersome to use. And once you have one-on-one coaching, that's more of a personal relationship. Do you use texting a lot? And how important is that for the delivery of just the connection with people?
Yeah, so we've built our own proprietary app. We have our own mobile app. We have our own website. We text with our clients. But something that might make you or any course creator or whatever feel a little better is you can obsess over the technology. And to me, the best technology just doesn't get in the way, right? So like, the old, MySpace versus Facebook, people say MySpace used to crash all the time, right? So like Facebook in the early on, especially never had interruptions, et cetera. The point is you don't want the technology to get in the way. So long as you're in that place, it really is about the person on the other end, right? So the teacher, the accountability person, buddy, the coach, et cetera. So, I love our proprietary app and mobile app and website, et cetera, but it doesn't work unless there's a really committed coach on the other end. So like we're always trying to make it better, but we're also trying to make the coaches better too, because that's really what's going to dictate and create the change.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I love this field in general. And I think it's going through a really interesting phase. I've just followed different venture capitalists and top entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. And there's a lot of attention now on this space and people feeling like the returns in this space will be just as high as it is in software. And I felt that for a while. And I think it's great because you get a huge social impact return. And the world's changing so fast. I think we really need people to be able to self-transform and a business return. And I just lost where I was going on that. But I think it's an interesting space. Oh, and there's interesting skill sets that go into it. And I like to, as somebody who focuses on learning how to learn, think about what are the skill sets. So if somebody wants to become a programmer or an entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley, there's really great tracks of, okay, go get your programming degree and here's your specialty within programming. And so I view coaching as one of the fundamental skills of this space because it's a great feedback loop. It's a fundamental unit of, can you take one person who you're talking with week after week and give them support such that they go to the next level? And then the great thing is you actually see that feedback loop of this worked, this didn't. And so somebody who's coached 50 clients, I'd much rather trust their advice than somebody who's, say, a public speaker and speaking 50 times. It's just night and day. How do you think about what the critical skill sets are for someone who wants to be involved in the space, create transformational programs?
Yeah, so that's, I think the number one characteristic or most important characteristic of a great coach is empathy. You really need to be able to understand where your client is at, where your student is at. You really need to try to get in their head, right? And so often, especially once you become more advanced at something, you forget that beginner's mindset. So the more you can remain empathetic, the more you can really get in their head. And, so if you can articulate what they're feeling before they even share it with you, they're going to instantly feel this connection. They're going to instantly feel this trust. And in order to make, coaching happen, or I should say to get the benefits of coaching, which is creating transformation in people, they have to like you. They have to trust you, right? And the best way to do that is for them to feel like you understand them, right? If they think he or she gets me, then you're in, because then they're more likely to listen to you.
Yeah. So you think empathy is one of the fundamental skill sets of coaching. And how do you become more empathetic? How do you anticipate what someone's feeling before they articulate it to you?
So I don't know how to become more empathetic, but I do know that when you're doing something for so long and you've seen thousands and thousands of clients, you see patterns. And for us, it allows us to anticipate where people are in their journey, right? We have all sorts of things, markers and et cetera, that allow us to see where they're at and really anticipate where they're at. So for that, it's just experience and pattern recognition, and spending time in the weeds and looking at that. But in terms of empathy, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
That's funny. Yeah, I think another thing I think is interesting beyond just becoming aware of what the different skill sets are putting them in the right sequence, because it could take years to it will take years to really become the master level. As you're alluding to with this, that you have to have a lot of pattern recognition. So would you say coaching is one of the first skill sets you'd recommend for people? And how long did you feel like it took you to really get that pattern recognition and get things going? How many reps are, I don't even know how to define someone's experience as a coach, but.
Well, what's your question? Do I think is the question, how long does it take to become a great coach, or?
Yeah, I realize there's kind of two questions. So the first question would be, when should somebody learn to be a coach in the progression to, if somebody wants to create programs and write articles that help people transform their lives?
Gotcha. So, I think coaching is something, I don't want to say it's innate, but I think if you look back in your life, you realize the type of impact you've had on people. So, just growing up, I played sports. I felt like I was always helping people I played with. Some of the best training I ever had was actually, I used to be a caddy in high school. And I dealt with all sorts of personalities. And very quickly you realize what works for this person might not work for that person. In fact, it'll give you the exact opposite of what you're looking for. So I think you have to look at situations where you've tried to help people and see how they respond. And for me, caddying was, I did that for 6 summers, and it was an amazing, just fascinating, just to witness these people, to see what I said, how that impacted their golf game. But I think anyone who wants to, create courses, et cetera, like, you have to think about your ultimate objective. And if your ultimate objective is to get people to take action and transform, then you need to be a coach. You need to be able to teach. And I think maybe coaching could be daunting, especially if you don't have experience. So I would say, how do you become a better teacher, right? And just focus on the teaching aspect. Because I think the teaching is more, I think coaching encompasses a lot more soft skills, whereas teaching is more you're imparting your wisdom. And then as you're doing that, you can see how people respond. And that's where you can kind of figure out the nuances a little more.
Are there any recommendations on how a coach can structure their practice such that they learn faster? So, for example, maybe having a feedback form that people fill out before every session so you could see how your feedback impacted them. Or, there's a few patterns you need to recognize and particularly focus on those. Number one, maybe there's different archetypes that people fall into through any transformation. So you want to understand what those archetypes are. Like you said, everyone's different. And then you want to narrow down to the few pieces of advice that consistently work or something like that.
Yeah, it's really tricky, man, because, there's no doubt the more reps you can get, the better, right? But asking a student or a client, or whatever you want to call it, we call them clients, whatever, for feedback is really hard because, think about, remember restaurants? People would go to restaurants before this. There's many times where I've gone to a restaurant and the food was not great. And the waiter or waitress comes over and she's like, how is it? And I'm like, oh, it's amazing. Or I'll just say, it's fine. It's great. Yet 2 seconds later, I'm like, this is awful. Or this is terrible. And that's just a waiter or a waitress. Yet I feel bad hurting their feelings. Right. So it's hard. It can be tricky to get feedback from someone you're working with closely because they might be afraid to hurt your feelings. So for me, like with MyBodyTutor, it was, I started in 2007. We started literally with one client and then it grew. And, it's like clients could tell me they love me or whatnot, but it really wasn't until there was word of mouth that it's like, no, they really do because they're spreading the word. I don't know if that's all that helpful. I think for any beginner coach, I think the key thing is just getting reps. Do it for free. Just, if you truly love what you're coaching and teaching, then you would do it for free. Because the truth is I did this many, many years for free before I started MyBodyTutor. I was a personal trainer, but even like just with friends, family in corporate America, like if you love what you're doing, then you're going to you can't help yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I always feel like there's two ways of looking at things. One is very tactical, but you miss something from it. And I think what you said speaks to that. And when I remember when you launched this and your energy was the exact same, you're like, I'm really excited. I want to see people have the results. You'd be talk about the results you've gotten with people. We're just excited and just always very focused on that. And so you alluded to that a little bit. So beyond just saying you were born with it or that's how you are, what are the things that how can people develop that within themselves? Let's say it's maybe a latent ability, but normally we don't think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately, well, first off, I want to say thank you because, every day I wake up, I feel so lucky to do what I do. And it's cool because, I mean, we were, so close back then and 14 years in and, I'm more passionate than ever. So, to me, my goal is to do this for the rest of my life. And so I just want to say thank you for that because it's cool. I mean, I'm very lucky. But to your point, I think, you really just have to practice. I mean, I don't know if there's a shortcut around it. You just have to practice coaching people. And the only way to develop that, if it's this ability that you don't even know you have, you have to get the reps in. I don't know if there's a better answer for that. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it definitely strikes me that, well, okay, I'll take a step back. I'm fascinated by just studying patterns of how people become who they are. And I think a lot of stories, we pick up with the person right before they take off. And we don't hear about all the skills that led before that. So it strikes me that you talk about you're excited about what you're doing and more than ever. And I think you'd have said the same thing 14 years ago, the exact same thing. And so I wonder, beyond caddying, what you did before then that already gave you that very rare mindset. I think very few people have that level of excitement. And I know before that job, your job, you weren't the most excited about when you're working in the finance industry.
Yeah, I had a stomachache every single. I hated what I was doing so much. I think it comes down to belief. I just really believed in what I was doing, and I know that might sound hokey or cheesy or whatever, but I mean, listen, I believed in what I was doing enough to quit my job and all that. I think you really just have to believe in what you're offering. And I felt that the accountability, let's just say, I mean, there's no doubt I'm a better coach today than I was even a month ago and a year ago. And every year I hope to be improving. So I felt that even if my coaching wasn't as good as I thought it was, the accountability would help as well. And I just really believed in the offering we had. And that's what gave me the confidence to push forward. And then it becomes a self-perpetuating thing because you get clients, you get, these unbelievable transformations, and your confidence becomes a direct result of the people you're helping, of the success you have. So you have to kind of get to the point where you can have a few successes, then you let that success drive your confidence.
Yeah, I think part of it too is giving yourself permission, because basically you were charging $100 when you first started. As you know, I was always just thinking about how much time it took you to provide that service. And there are those people who charge $100 per hour. A lot of people who charge $100 per hour, you're going way above and beyond that. But I think you're willing to do it because you just had so much passion, and that gave you the experience. And for me, it was the same with writing, that in getting into writing, I just gave myself permission to write about what I wanted to write about. Even if I didn't even know how I was going to make money, I was just so excited about it. And that's when I really feel like I became a kid in a candy store. And that's where the financial success really came mostly after that. So I think there's something about just taking what you already have, the fire inside of you, and just stoking it. And there's so many times where, probably you took that finance job because you thought, well, it's prestigious. That's maybe what my peers are doing. And versus this other bet. Other people might have said you were crazy at first, but you just followed it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, even before I was charging $100, I was charging $75. And you always used to say, you're not charging enough. You're not charging. You even still say to this day, we're not charging enough for what we offer. And I appreciate that. And I remember
it's $250 per month now on the low end
for coaching.
Yeah. Which is amazing. I mean, just it's, again, if you go to a top trainer at a gym, I was paying $125 per an hour for just one session. So, I mean, you're getting a whole month of daily feedback. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, we try to, make it, really accessible. I think that's a really good point though. I think it really drives me crazy because, people charge a lot of money because they think it signals, expertise. But then if you're charging a certain level, you have to be at a certain level. And if you're charging, let's say $1,000, and there's many coaches who charge way more than that, which is, crazy in my opinion. If you can't deliver the results, then you're very quickly going to be out of, people to help. Whereas if you start small, I think people are willing to give you a chance, and you can build up. So I think that's a really good point as well, is you start small. I mean, you can't charge what an expert level coach charges, because you don't have that expertise. And if you truly love what you're doing, then the money really doesn't matter. I mean, we always used to talk about, you always used to say, Adam, what's your, I always forget the term.
Economics of one unit.
Yeah, the economics of one unit. And I'm like, I don't know. You're like, you're probably making 40 cents an hour. And I'm like, yeah, I probably am, but it doesn't matter because I love doing this. And, I think if you chase your passion and if you truly love what you're doing, the money will follow. Because if you're just chasing an opportunity, you're going to be on to the next opportunity whenever that arises. And to me, that's the ultimate competitive advantage. Like, I would do this for free. I intend to do this for the rest of my life because I love doing it. Like, I can work all day long.
What's your vision for the future of your company and yourself in this world of transformation?
I just really, we're 14 years in now. I want to continue to do what we're doing. I mean, I've been very committed to our mission. I've been very steadfast in our values and the way we run our business. And, I feel like we're finally getting to a point where we have some really nice momentum. I want to just keep building on what we're doing. This is the point, I think, where companies would be like, well, how can we serve more people at a cheaper way, or take on more people? And to me, this is the inflection point where we keep doing what we're doing. We're not trying to be the next Weight Watchers or company like that. My goal is to, build what we're doing to be the world leader in daily accountability and daily coaching around health and fitness.
There's certainly temptation. You've built a lot of friends who are very successful in Silicon Valley. And so I'm sure you have people telling you, Adam, you got to raise money. What you're offering here is awesome. You got to scale this. What's made it so that you've just been so focused and haven't been like, okay, in a moment of weakness, listening, all right, we just got to go big here and sacrifice your value?
I mean, there really hasn't. I mean, you hear about these stupid numbers and you're like, that's a lot of money. But I remember how I felt walking to work at Ernst Young every day. I literally had a stomachache every day because I hated what I was doing so much. So to me, the real reward truly is getting to do what I love doing. It's like, listen, we're way bigger now than we were, 5 years ago and 10 years. Like, to me, the reward is getting to do what I love doing. So it's really never a thought. I want to help people in a certain way because I really believe that's what people need. So I think
we're starting to get to kind of my therapy type questions because I admire, I think there's a lot of wisdom in your approach. And I know for me, sometimes, when you're surrounded by people who are achievers, even though I'm doing well and I don't need to make more money, basically, but I still feel somehow less than, for whatever reason. I'm honestly trying to just understand it myself. When I feel that, I notice it leads me to think in ways or try to act more rationally, or even sacrifice what's even something I already have that's important for something that's less important. Do you ever feel that where you see a new startup in the health space that they're doing group coaching or something, and you're like, oh shoot, they're growing really fast, they raise money? And
listen, I'm very aware of what's going on out there. I see the numbers. I see these companies. It makes you pause, you take a look. But I think, I'll go back. I'll ask you the question because, you joked. Let's just say someone gave you $50 million. Would your life change all that much? I think in the startup world that we're both enamored by and so fascinated by, we tend to view success as a money amount, a dollar amount. So I think there's definitely some validation. But let's just say, you sold your company for $50 million or $100 million. All right, great. You get the short-term ego boost. Everyone knows you're a big success. But then what? To me, that's then what? To me, if I sold, MyBodyTutor, then I don't get to do what I love doing anymore. right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm playing a different game. I'm not building a company to sell. I'm building a company because I want to help people and I want to serve people and I want to do it in the way I want to do it. Right. So, we've had many people it's very flattering. We've had customers say they want to invest money in our company. But the thing is, if we take on money, then I wind up working for the investors. I don't work for our customers and clients anymore.
Right.
And,
Right.
I want to serve our customers and clients in the best possible way we can. I don't want my board to say, you know what, you've only grown 40% this year, or your profit margin isn't as high as it should be, you need to do something else. That's not serving the client, that's serving the investor.
So let's take money out of the equation. And I think we're on the same page there. And just focus on impact. And so let's say impact, or one of the ways I think about it is it's the number of people you reach times the impact you have per person. So you could have a model where you have a really high impact per person, like being a parent. You can never have more impact on one person than if you're a parent, or somebody who just makes a very small change that some people don't even notice, but it just adds up because it's reaching so many people. How do you think about that? Just, there's the growth, part of the value in growth. I interviewed Russ Ruffino for this podcast. They're at $15 million and they want to reach 100 million because that means they can reach, X number more people. How do you think about that? Do you ever feel urgency there?
Yeah, I think, that's a good question is to figure out, the type of impact you had. So when I first started, I was obsessed with making a large impact on a small amount of people. Or to put it another way, you can only make a large, I don't know if that's true, but I used to think you can only make a large impact on a small amount of people. There we go. As we, progressed, I realized, you don't necessarily have to be everyone's, make a massive impact on each person. You can scale that down a little bit, and have a big impact on a lot of people. I don't know. I think it comes down to really just defining, and it's obviously a very challenging question, what you're in it for, what makes you happy, what your objective is. And for me, it's always been about helping people and making an impact and transforming their lives. There's nothing that makes me happier besides seeing my family happy than when someone gets from point A to point Z. And I think if you truly, for me, that's truly the case. Now, for someone else, if it's not, and they're lying to themselves, then there might be all these, there might be some cognitive dissonance. There might be some, thoughts that enter your mind that it's like, well, maybe I should do this. So I think you have to really be honest with yourself. And there's no right or wrong way. What makes me happy, I think it's just defining how do you define a successful life, right? So my mom is a former teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. I like to consider myself a teacher at heart. But I also enjoy business and building things. So I was very lucky that I was able to marry the two. But making an impact on people is a huge part of my life. That's just something I've always wanted to do.
And how did you get clarity on that? Was it just happen naturally through, you mentioned your mom and caddying and those sorts of experiences? Or is there any sort of exercises that you'd recommend for people that you've recommended and it's really helped them get that clarity? And I'm harping on this a little bit because for the first part, I talked about tactics, but through my own teaching of other people, I've really seen that mindset is almost always 80% of it, at least, or 90%. So yes. I think there's something to your mindset here that's really worth drilling into that forms the foundation for everything else that you're doing. And without that, the tactics won't work.
Yeah. I think I was very lucky in that I worked in corporate America and I hated it, right? I could have easily liked it, but I always used to sit in my office in Times Square, staring at this unbelievable view. And I would ask myself, if someone paid me, $20 million a year to do this job, would I do it? And at that point in my life, I probably would have said, yeah, I would do it for a year or two, but I wouldn't do this for the rest of my life. And I realized right then and there, I felt like I was making zero impact. And that to me was everything I needed to know. It wasn't, sometimes I'll ask people, it's like, would you dig ditches for $1 million a year? And the answer for me is no way. I need to have meaning and purpose in my work. That is so important to me. So how I make money is critical. And there's people who just want to make a lot of money and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think the more experiences you have, especially younger people who, are just coming out of college and school, et cetera, like sometimes the best thing you can realize is what you don't want to do, because it gets you closer to what you want to do. I just happen to be very lucky that I realized like early on. It's a tricky thing. I mean, figuring out what you want to do is very tricky, and what's important to you, of course.
Yeah. But I think we left people with a lot of really, really great advice that I think there's a big opportunity right now that if you're someone who loves transforming people's lives, there's never been a better time to be able to do that than the world we live in right now. And I think you're a shining example of a way that you could do that's really fulfilling. So, Adam, I'm going to give you the last word here. Anything you want to leave us with? And also, where can people go to learn more about you and MyBodyTutor?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I mean, the best way to find us is go to mybodytutor.com. You can find me on all the socials. You can always email me. I guess my last word is, we had two very distinct and interesting conversations. As you said, in the early part of it is about the tactics. I think I would say small is the new big. So try to really, start small. Ask yourself, can I see myself doing this in 5 years from now? Can I see myself doing this for the rest of my life? Right. And realize that you don't have to, do everything all at once. So keep that in mind. And then I think when it comes to the other part of our conversation is, really figuring out what you want and being honest with yourself. And I think if you can truly be honest with yourself and go after that, I think that's when ultimate, fulfillment comes and happens. I think when there's a disconnect between our actions and our desires, unhappiness ensues. And when they're aligned, then you will feel, I think very happy and fulfilled.
All right. Perfect way to end it. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Michael Simmons Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. If you found value in today's episode, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast player.